Amelia Mosley and you're watching this BTN Science Week special. As you can see, I'm not in the studio today, I'm here at the zoo. And there's a good reason for that. It's because we're going to be exploring this year's Science Week theme, which is species survival. We're going to find out about the threats facing some of the plants and animals of planet Earth and what's being done to protect them. We're also going to learn about the lives of some very famous naturalists with the help of our rookie reporters. All that soon, but first, have you ever looked at a creature like this one and thought, how did that happen? No offence, buddy. Well, we share the planet with a whole heap of amazing plants and animals, and Cale decided to look into how it is that life on Earth became so diverse. Check it out.
The diversity of life on Earth is magnificent. Millions of species grow, flower, fly, and hurry up across the planet. So, where did all of these feathers, fur, and fins come from?
Oh, hey, sorry, it is just me, but I kind of thought the story needed a David Attenborough voice. Anyway, let's go find out. Hi, Rachel.
Hi.
There are so many different animals on Earth. Some are microscopic, some are as big as elephants. What is a species?
So it's a great question. We have a whole scientific system of classifying living things. It's called taxonomy. And in that classification, the smallest, most specific part of it is the species.
The definition of a species is not actually that straightforward. And sometimes there's disagreement over which species an organism belongs to. But basically, it's a group of organisms that can reproduce, that is, make babies, share characteristics that make them look pretty similar, and share a majority of DNA.
DNA is a very clear scientific method to be able to use to look at relatedness of things.
Okay, so that's a species. But I still have a few more questions.
Now, Steve, I think I know what a species is now, but clearly there's lots of them, so how do we get so many species?
This incredible diversity of species came to us through the process of evolution.
Evolution is the process of change over time. It's an idea that's been around for ages, but we didn't quite understand how it worked until these two guys, Charles Darwin and Alfred Russel Wallace, came up with the theory of natural selection. They recognised that within a population of animals, each individual is slightly different. And some of those differences will mean that an animal is better at surviving in its specific environment. It might be a slightly skinnier beak that's good at picking up insects, or a slightly stronger beak that's good at cracking nuts, or perhaps a slightly longer neck that's good for eating hard-to-reach leaves. Those animals are then more likely to eat and survive and have babies with skinny beaks, or strong beaks, or long necks too. Over a really long time, those tiny changes can become big changes and give rise to a whole new species.
Take, for example, an animal moving into a cave environment. If they have an ability to smell their environment much better, then they're going to be adapted better, they'll find their food and they'll survive and reproduce.
Here's the specimen.
Through the use of DNA and the fossil record, we can trace where all of these millions of species came from, and all of the species before them, and before them, and before them. Right back to the beginning of life on Earth.
Charles Darwin is one of the most famous scientists who ever lived, whose ideas changed history. But he didn't always seem destined for greatness. Charles Darwin was born in Shrewsbury, England in 1809. His family was wealthy. His father was a respected doctor and his mother was a member of the Wedgwood family, famous for making pottery. But she died when Charles was just 8, and so he was cared for by his sisters. Charles didn't do that well in school. He didn't like learning the classics and preferred to dabble in chemistry, which was not a respectable subject for a gentleman, earning him the nickname Gas. His father was worried that he was aimless and sent him to study medicine at Edinburgh University. There he learnt a lot. How to identify the age of rocks, how to classify plants and stuffed animals, and radical ideas about evolution, the change of living things over time. He didn't learn much medicine. In fact, surgery made him sick. So he swapped universities and prepared for life as an Anglican gentleman. But his life changed when he decided to take a trip on the HMS Beagle. It was setting out to chart the coast of Patagonia, and Charles came on board to keep the captain company and do his own exploring. He was rapt. He saw jungles that left his mind in a, quote, chaos of delight, collected amazing creatures and ancient fossils, and watched as geological forces shaped the earth. He marvelled at the beauty and cruelty of nature, and of human beings. And all of it made him wonder about time and life and change. By the time the Beagle had sailed home via Tahiti, New Zealand and Australia, Darwin was full of questions. Why did ancient animals become extinct? Why did they share traits with living creatures? Why did creatures differ from place to place? He began to think, perhaps all these things were connected. Charles published the diaries of his trip and spent the next few years starting a family, breeding pigeons and studying barnacles, all the while exploring his theory of natural selection. Another naturalist named Alfred Russel Wallace had come up with a similar theory on his own travels, and he wrote to Darwin. In 1858, the two men published what's seen as one of the most important scientific papers ever written. 1 year later, Darwin published his book, On the Origin of Species. It was controversial because it flew in the face of what a lot of people had been taught, that the world was created by God as it is. But it was also a huge success. Darwin spent the rest of his life testing his theory, and in the years since, it's become the foundation of modern biology, forever changing our understanding of the world and our place in it.
As we now know, life on Earth has changed a lot over the past billion years or so. And in that time, a lot of species have come and gone. And unfortunately, in recent times, we've seen quite a few disappear. In fact, scientists think we're in the middle of something called a mass extinction. Ren looked into what that is and the impact it could have on creatures like this.
Picture your favourite tree. Your favourite flower. Your favourite animal. Your favourite fruit. Disappearing.
Yeah, look, it's not a fun thing to talk about, but the truth is a lot of the beautiful things around us are starting to go extinct.
Have you ever seen a Pyrenean ibex? An Acina exigua? A golden toad? A St. Helena olive? A thylacine? You haven't, have you? And that's because they're amongst the many plants and animals that have become extinct in the past 100 years.
Now, extinction is nothing new. In fact, it's believed that 99% of all species that have ever existed don't anymore.
As new species evolve, it's normal for other ones to fade away. But there have been a few times in the past 500 million years where a whole lot of species have disappeared in a short amount of time, in events we call mass extinctions. There have been 5 of them. The most recent famously killed the dinosaurs.
But here's a not-so-fun fact for you. Experts believe we're actually living through our 6th extinction right now.
While past mass extinctions were caused by things like natural changes in the environment, volcanic eruptions, and an asteroid, Scientists believe this mass extinction is because of us. It's said to have started about 100,000 years ago, when humans started moving around to different countries and changing their environments, and ramped up when we invented agriculture about 12,000 years ago. Today, humans are clearing rainforests and wetlands to make way for cities and farms. We're overhunting, overfishing, polluting our oceans with plastic, and changing the climate. We've introduced lots of invasive species to new environments, and our plants and animals are suffering the consequences.
So what are we doing to fix this?
Well, there are researchers trying to understand more about why species are going extinct and what we can do to save them. And many organisations, governments and ordinary people are working really hard to protect things that are at risk. There are even some more out there solutions, like this so-called doomsday vault hidden deep in the Arctic. Inside are about 642 million seeds, mostly for crops that humans rely on. So if we do cause them to go extinct, we have a backup. There are similar banks around the world, full of frozen reproductive cells of animals, which could be used in the future to save them from extinction. There are even people working on a thing called de-extinction, using advanced genetic technologies to try and bring back some animals that are no longer with us, like Tasmanian tigers and woolly mammoths. But in the meantime, many are hoping we can save the species that are still here.
So we can continue to enjoy the amazing natural world that's all around us.
She sells seashells by the seashore. It's a rhyme you might have heard before, but do you know the scientist who's thought to have inspired it? Her name was Mary Anning, and she was born in 1799 in Lyme Regis in England. As a child, she could be found collecting seashells and fossils with her father, who sold them to make extra money. But when Mary was 11, her father died, leaving the family in poverty. Mary and her brothers continued to collect shells and fossils, which they sold to collectors and scholars. One day, her brother found a fossilized skull he thought belonged to a crocodile, but he didn't have time to investigate. Mary did, and the 12-year-old carefully excavated the first known specimen of an ichthyosaur, a fish-like creature that lived in the Jurassic period. It was put on display and caused a big stir. Back then, the idea of an extinct animal was still controversial. Of course, Mary didn't get credit for the discovery, but geologists did start to visit Lyme Regis, and she learned all she could from them. She read books and even dissected creatures that washed up on the beach to learn about anatomy. And her fossil finds continued. She found the world's most complete skeleton of a plesiosaurus, and a few years later, a pterodactyl. Despite her lack of education, Mary became known as an expert in the new scientific field of paleontology. One of her most important discoveries was coprolites. Alongside her friend, geologist William Buckland, she figured out that these rocks were actually fossilized poos that contained evidence of their owners' last meals. Despite all of this, Mary remained poor. In 1945, she was diagnosed with breast cancer. Her friends in the Royal Geological Society raised money to support her, and when she died, 2 years later, they donated a stained glass window made in her honour to her local church. Still, for many years, Mary Anning wasn't well known, except as the girl who sold seashells by the seashore. Today, she's seen as one of the most important paleontologists ever, and her lifelong quest for knowledge is an inspiration for those who search for answers in the world around them.
So to tell us a bit more about endangered species and what's being done to help them, I'm here with Adelaide zookeeper Erin. And Erin, you've brought a special guest with you. Who is this?
I definitely have. So this is Rambo, and he's a brush-tailed bettong.
Oh, Rambo.
So they are a native macropod, so they do hop around like kangaroos. They are unfortunately critically endangered. They were found in 90% of Australia, now only found 10 to 15% of their original populations. So not doing great, but they are part of an amazing program here in South Australia called Mana Bangara, which basically has translocated them from other populations around Australia to our Yorke Peninsula Innes National Park, and they're doing really well down there at the moment.
That's so good to hear. What are some of the rarest species in the zoo that you're helping to protect?
Our orange-bellied parrot program, which is about the bird the size of a budgerigar. It flies from South Australia and Victoria down to Tasmania back every year. Pretty amazing trip. Unfortunately, they're not doing great out in the wild, very, very low numbers. So we work with other zoos to breed them up in captivity for release.
So Erin, what about your average person? What can we do to help endangered species around Australia?
So there are a couple of things you could do. Number one, putting things like nesting boxes up in your backyard. And then something that's really important is keeping things like your cats inside. Unfortunately, cats are one of the biggest killers of native animals, and things like bettongs here have been affected by feral cats and foxes.
Oh, such good advice. And I do have cats, but they are indoor cats.
Well,
so don't you worry, Rambo, they're not coming anywhere near you. Thanks, Erin.
No worries.
Jane Goodall always loved animals. When she was a little girl, she was given a toy chimpanzee named Jubilee, and she took it with her everywhere. She read Tarzan and Dr. Dolittle and dreamed of going to Africa. When she left school, she trained as a secretary and worked as a waitress and for a documentary film company, saving every penny to fulfil her dream. It finally came true in 1957 when Jane went to visit her friend who lived on a farm in Kenya. While she was there, she met a famous paleoanthropologist, Dr. Lewis Seymour Bassett Leakey. He was impressed by Jane's passion and arranged for her to go to the Gombe Stream Game Reserve to study chimpanzees. It wasn't easy. At first the chimps would run when they saw her, but eventually she gained their trust. She observed behaviour that no one else had seen before, like hunting for meat and using and even making tools, something most thought only humans could do. Jane continued her work in the field and got a PhD from Cambridge University. Eventually, her focus shifted from research to conservation. She founded the Jane Goodall Institute, which helps African communities to protect chimpanzees and their environments, and Roots and Shoots, which empowers kids around the world to help the environment.
My mission today, the reason I keep going, age 90, is because if we lose hope, we do nothing. We don't want to bring children into a world where from the very beginning they believe everything's hopeless. If we get together, if we roll up our sleeves and take action, there is hope for the future of the planet.
As Erin told us, we can all play a part in species survival, and it starts with taking care of the environment we live in. We caught up with some young conservationists to find out what they're doing to help. What do you reckon, guys? Should we take a look? I think that's a yes.
My name is Django and I live in the southern Fleurieu. I've always been really interested in looking after the environments and conservation. It's just a good way to zone out. My local environment is very important to me because I've grown up here. I see the importance that each ecosystem has.
My name's Alice and I live in the most beautiful place on earth, Wollonga. So I've grown up always loving the environment. We have grey striped thrushes come into our veranda because the acoustics are good. We've had native birds nest on our fuse box because it's nice and warm there. There's so much biodiversity, there's so many native plants.
I first joined the Youth Environment Council in year 8 and I joined it because I wanted to meet like-minded people.
You do a project which could be anything to do with the environment. My project at the moment, it's kind of in collaboration with the Environment Club at my school. We did a talk with all the year 7s about what to put in what bin. We're trying to get some plants to plant in a plot.
My project is to create and restore habitat for fluoreo birds. I've planted well over 1,000 Indigenous endemic species across multiple different ecosystems and habitats, as well as putting up nest boxes which have had major success with breeding kookaburras, brush and ringtail possums and owlet nightjars. I'm very passionate about the environment because I see it as a great way to make change.
It's so crucial that we look after our native fauna. The cute little bandicoots and bettongs, they actually move a ridiculous amount of soil each night, which is so crucial for seed distribution.
I think it feels hard for young people to get involved in the environment, but in reality it's quite simple. Young people can do lots of different little things to make a difference, whether that be plant a plant or weed around some native plants.
Join a group and talk to your friends and get them to be passionate about it.
Young people have a big impact on how we can look after different ecosystems, and it's because of their voice, because it's our generation coming up.
If I asked you to think of a nature documentary, any nature documentary, chances are this is the voice that comes into your head.
This magnificent creature preparing, whoops.
It belongs to David Attenborough, naturalist, conservationist and broadcaster. David was born in 1926 in England. His dad was the principal of the University of Leicester, where he spent his childhood collecting fossils, stones and specimens. He even made some money supplying newts to the university's zoology department. At uni, David studied geology and zoology. But it was when he got a job at the BBC that David got to combine his love of nature with a newfound talent for broadcasting.
Tonight, we've got a rather different programme for you.
His first TV programme was about animals from the London Zoo, which gave him the idea to follow the zoo workers on an animal collecting expedition. It was the first of many, many documentaries. Attenborough became controller of the BBC in 1965, but kept travelling and presenting. He also commissioned some very famous programmes that weren't about nature, but never lost his passion for exploring and filming the natural world. Eventually, he stepped down from leadership so he could focus on what he loved. In 1979, he released Life on Earth, a series that would change wildlife documentaries forever. It was serious, scientific, and spectacular.
We see the world in the same way as they do.
The crew came up with new techniques to get the shots that Attenborough wanted, and filmed animals and events that had never been filmed before. He followed it up with documentaries that explored the lives and environments of all sorts of living things: plants, birds, mammals, insects, reptiles, and amphibians. He also used his films to draw people's attention to the impact humans were having on the natural world. In the past few decades, he's become a passionate campaigner for environmental issues.
We are, after all, the greatest problem solvers to have ever existed on Earth.
David Attenborough may have seen more of the natural world than anyone else, and after 70 years on our screens, may have done more than anyone else to make ordinary people aware of the extraordinary planet we live on.
Well, that's it for this year's Science Week special. A huge thank you to Zoos SA for having us and to all of our animal friends. Also, a big thank you to our rookie reporters. You guys are awesome. Keep up the good work. We'll be back with a regular episode of BTN next week, but as always, in the meantime, you can check out our website for more specials and stories, and there are teaching resources up there as well. Have a good one and I'll see you soon. Bye.